This is an extract from the Leader Coronavirus Daily podcast by the Evening Standard and hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for it on your podcast provider. The boss of British Airways has told MPs the airline is fighting for survival.
The relationship is very clear. Fewer passengers means fewer flights, and fewer flights means fewer people required to actually service them.
Alex Cruz was talking to the Commons Transport Select Committee, which has been asking why BA says it needs to cut 12,000 jobs because of the coronavirus pandemic. Can an institution like that really be in as much trouble as it says? Well, the travel expert Paul Charles from the PC agency is with me. Paul, if a company like British Airways says it might not survive, that really brings home how serious this crisis is to the travel industry.
It does, and British Airways is, of course, the stalwart of the airline industry. It's just celebrated its 100th birthday. And so this is the last thing that it would have planned for, like most airlines. And when Alex Cruz says that it's fighting for survival, he's mirroring and echoing what other CEOs of many airlines are saying at the moment, that they are in a race against time and they're having to slash their costs dramatically in order to even break even. It's not about making a profit. It's about survival and even attempting to break even. So he's serious when he says it.
Yeah, is it really imaginable that BA could disappear?
I don't think BA will disappear, and there's a BA plane flying over me at the moment. No, I don't think they will disappear, because even if an airline goes down to 5 or 10 planes, the brand would survive and they would rebuild for the longer term. The key now is for CEOs and airline bosses to cut their costs as much as they can so that they can retain the cash they've got. And don't forget, BA has quite a lot of cash in the bank, even though it's losing 20 to 30 million pounds a day by its own estimates. It still has quite a lot of cash in the bank, and it has to preserve that cash like most airlines. So as long as they can preserve the cash and start to rebuild what's in the bank, then they'll be fine. But there are other airlines that will disappear, sadly, around the world.
And you can see the effect of cost cutting when we know that BA announced, I think it was in April, that 12,000 jobs were going to have to go, which I think is about 30% of its workforce. But are there solutions yet? Is there anything that the airlines want to do or can do that people are looking at?
They are working on solutions, and the one thing about the airline industry, especially the British airline industry, is how innovative it is. It's always been very strong as a sector, and that's why it's fighting with government at the moment to preserve its innovation. Yes, I think the most important thing that could be done is to open up more corridors. There are some corridors in place at the moment, especially to Europe, but long haul, there are very few that you don't have to quarantine when you come back from them. So the key is to open up corridors where business travelers especially, as well as leisure, would not have to quarantine on their return. And of course, the most profitable routes for BA and Virgin Atlantic are across the Atlantic. The London-New York, the London-Washington, London-LA, San Francisco, London-Chicago. These are all profitable routes for BA and Virgin. So BA, understandably, would like to see, and it is being worked on, the corridor, especially between London and New York, open up. There are many people who do want to see family and friends again, let alone business travelers in New York. And so it would be wise to have some sort of trial to open it up.
And is New York as open to that as well? Because this is something that Alex Cruz mentioned to MPs today. Has to go both ways, though.
It does, and indeed the US authorities are very warm to the idea if it's some form of trial, a test. It's been called for by the likes of the World Travel and Tourism Council, by US travel authorities. So it is being worked on behind closed doors. And it would make sense if you can create a trial and it works well, as we've seen with trials in sport, for example, over the summer, which have been very successful, especially cricket. Then why not do it on a key route like London, New York? We have to get travel moving again. It's the only way to start increasing revenues and boosting passenger confidence, which is vital.
Exactly, getting those passengers back on the planes. But Alex Cruz did say that he saw no short-term coming back of our passengers. That's That's the big problem, isn't it, Paul?
I mean, airlines are now planning on the basis that it will take 4 or 5 years to recover to where they were in 2019. So that's a long, long time. And sadly, many of the airline bosses around today who are predicting it's going to take 5 years won't be around themselves in 5 years' time. So we'll be watching closely to see how they develop. But the only answer is either a vaccine, which you'd hope there would be one within a year's time, or to reopen routes and manage the trials, manage the process of reopening very, very carefully. It's the only way you're going to know if it's going to be successful and work. So the trials have to happen, and there have to be more long-haul routes opened up on the UK's quarantine list as well. There are very few long-haul routes available where you don't have to quarantine. So the more that can be opened, the more that enables the airlines to fly more often to those long-haul destinations which are more profitable. So as a boss of an airline, you've only got 3 options at the moment. Cut your costs as much as possible, fly more by using more planes on more destinations, so having more routes open up, and thirdly, hope there's a vaccine, and crucially, you might make some money from flying it in your own cargo holds around the world. Those are the only options for airlines at the moment.
Search for the Leader Coronavirus Daily on any podcast provider to hear more from the podcast.